Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Evangelist THEO here on LuvBay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And LuvBay, we want you to remember, know, and understand that we are rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on tonight is child support. It's a touchy subject, touchy for so many different reasons, but we're going to talk about child support on tonight. We have with us our guest on this evening, Jennifer DIPILLO, Esquire, Director of Crime Victims Law Project for Delaware County Victim Assistance Center. This is her second time coming back with us, and we really appreciate her being here on tonight. We also have with us as guest TYB, founder and producer of LuvBay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. So I'm thankful for both of you being here with us on this evening. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for myself or for our guest on this evening, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. You can also text us at 437-778-3299. And with that, TYB, I would ask that you would go first and greet our listeners and viewers on this evening.
Good evening, listeners and viewers. If you are joining us for the first time, well, you're welcome. My name is THEO, and I'm the CEO and founder of LuvBay. And we've been going at it for close to 4 years. Next month, on the 19th of April, will be exactly 4 months where this radio station came into operation. And we're so happy where we are right now. And we'll continue to bring out programs that inspire, that educate, that entertain. Because in these times that we live in right now, we need more information rather than any other thing. Because people are searching for more information. And it seems as if post-COVID, a lot has happened. Mental health, domestic abuse, and all those kind of stuff. We seek to address all these things through programs like this. So I'm here to give my quota to the discussion for this evening, and it's going to be very interesting indeed. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Jennifer, would you greet our listeners and viewers on tonight?
Sure. Thank you for having me back again. It is a pleasure to be here. I've been practicing law in Pennsylvania for over 20 years. I think we're at 22 right now. I have exclusively dealt with victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and other crimes. That's what I've dedicated my career to. I help my clients for free. We don't charge them. And I'm happy to share my wealth of knowledge with all the viewers today. And I hope if you have any questions, you please let us know.
Thank you so much. So listeners, as usual, we want to start with sharing some resources. First, again, I would like to thank those who have donated to Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. If you would like to continue to support us financially, you can visit GoFundMe.com and look for our nonprofit, Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc., and help us to continue to help those in need with our emergency and immediate funding for victims and survivors of domestic violence. I first would like to share Pastor Darius Daniels. He's the pastor of Change Church. His website is dariusdaniels.com, and his YouTube channel is Darius Daniels TV. We have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their website is thehotline.org. Their phone number is 800-799-7233. And then we have the National Teen Dating Abuse Helpline. Their website is loveisrespect.org. Their phone number is 1-866-331-9474. And then in Media, Pennsylvania, we have the Crime Victims Law Project, which Jennifer is a part of. Their 24-hour hotline number is 610-566-4342. Now, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the National Teen Dating Hotline, and are for the United States. And the information that I just shared, the Crime Victims Law Project, that's Media, Pennsylvania. I want to emphasize again, wherever you are, you can look for resources where you live. There is a national number, there is a national website for wherever you live, whatever country you live. Once you reach out to a national number, they can give you a local organization that's closer to where you live. So wherever you are, LuvBay, reach out, seek out to get the help where you are, because it's available. It's something that's out there. And as I tell children, I tell adults the same thing. Keep seeking and keep looking until you find the help that you need. So with that, I want to move right into our topic on tonight, which is child support. So Jennifer, I'm going to ask that you would start first for our listeners and viewers who may have missed you the first time, if you could tell us about Crime Victims Law Project, and what you do, why and how it was started, and we can go there first.
So first, I want to say I tell my kids too, asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. So just realize that that's a really important thing. Everybody needs help sometimes. So don't feel bad about asking for help or feel like you failed. You're not failing. You're actually doing yourself a service. So the Crime Victims Law Project was started back in 2001, and it was 4 crisis centers that sort of came together. So in Pennsylvania, we have counties. And so it was 4 counties that were sort of closely aligned that met together, and they were rape crisis centers initially, but now they help all victims of crime. And they wrote for a grant to the federal government, which they received, and they were able to start this law project. So prior to 2001, there weren't many organizations that had lawyers on staff that were able to help victims of crimes for free. So this was sort of a unique thing. I was hired as one of the 2 staff attorneys that we had and covered 2 separate counties in Pennsylvania. And it slowly over time morphed into different things until we sort of ended where we are right now, which is the Crime Victims Law Project is part of Delaware County Victim Assistance Center. I'm solely in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, and I direct the project now. We currently have 1 staff attorney. We're looking to hire a second, and or possibly a legal secretary or paralegal. And I also hold a case load myself, so I'm still in the game, still go to court, but I also am there to assist my attorneys and my staff and make sure that I can jump in if needed, if they're not able to do a certain case at any given time, and also be able to provide them assistance in prepping for any of their cases that they have.
Thank you. And that hotline number that we shared, that is for any type of crime that may
Correct.
occur. That's not just restricted to domestic violence. So we want listeners and viewers to know and understand that if you have been the victim of any type of crime, you can call and get assistance from this resource. But on tonight, we're talking about the issue of child support. Which again, it's touchy. And TYB, as you were greeting the listeners and viewers on tonight, you said that one of the main goals of LuvBay is to provide information, real, true information, education. So we're not just dipping and dabbing in feelings or opinions or gossip. We really want to share true information that can help individuals move forward in our lives. And so as we're talking about the importance of child support when we're dealing with domestic violence, Jennifer, as we were sharing a few minutes ago, some victims and survivors don't know or understand that they are in fact entitled to child support for the children that they have with the perpetrator. If they're in the midst of a domestic violence situation, or if the other parent has committed some type of crime against them, they are entitled to child support. So on that issue right there, that's huge. Could you expand on that for our listeners and viewers?
Sure. So child support, and everything I'm saying again is Pennsylvania based. So just keep that in mind. But child support is statutory. What that means is there's in a book, there's a calculation that you would make for child support. So it's pretty complicated, and a lot of us can't do it by hand. So we have calculators that are meant to do it, to plug the information in and get the right number for you. There's a lot of factors that come into play. first factor, and this goes back to custody, which we talked about once before, is who has primary custody of the children. And I'm using legal terms and I'm going to explain them all. Primary custody deals with the physical nature of custody. Who actually has the children? Where are the children residing? And where are they the majority of the time? That's primary custody. Many years ago when I first started, it was very typical for it to be mostly mothers that had primary custody. And I don't think I'm being sexist when I say this. This is reality, truth.
Yeah.
Most moms had primary physical custody. Dads had what we called visitation, which would be, 1 or 2 nights during the week. They get to see the kids for dinner. And then every other weekend, dad would have time with the kids. And then there was a breakup of holidays and vacations. So in those situations, mom had primary custody. So mom would be entitled to child support. As time has gone on, we have moved away from one parent being a primary custodian and there being a joint shared 50-50 type situation, which has a major effect on child support. So there is another calculation that we have to look at, is how many overnights does the non-primary custodian have? And if it hits a certain threshold, then that the secondary custodian, will say, may obtain credit for child support. So it's a weighing of how much time they are spending with the children. And, the statute looks at that saying, well, if you each have 50-50, you split your time. Nobody's entitled to child support because you're each doing half of the work. But if you have somebody that's doing more than 50%, then they are entitled to some portion of child support. And again, that would all be plugged into this calculator and a number comes out. I will say that most parents that I talk to are unaware of the actual amount of support and the numbers that come out. I'll have a client come in and they say, oh, he's giving me $400 a month for 3 kids, and I go, let's plug the numbers in. How much does he make? How much do you make if you work? Some moms don't work. That's a zero. Um, we end up coming up with, and we joked about this earlier pre-show, $1,500 a month when he was paying you $4. And they don't
Right.
realize that. They think they're better off taking what he's giving and not, pushing any buttons and worrying about what's going to happen. The good thing about support now is that the court tries its very, very best to make sure that they can garnish wages. And that's another legal term. But what that means is they go to the employer and they provide a court order, and the employer then has to pull that money out before it even gets to the payer, the person that's paying. So they don't even see it. It's just coming out ahead of time. So that makes it a lot easier. Back years ago, they had to actually write a check and send it in, and there was a processing, and it took a really long time. Now it just gets pulled out. There are unfortunate circumstances where you have people that own their own business or are working what we call under the table, where they're getting paid maybe in cash by somebody and they're not being, it's not being reported. That's more difficult because we can't garnish those wages if we don't have an actual employer, a real employer. And those are more difficult cases. But it is great when you do have an employer and they pull the money right out and there's no question there. There is a process. So you tell me when you want me to talk about what it looks like to file if you choose to do so.
Well, so I do. I want to share. Well, first of all, I agree with everything that you said. Because it's real and true information. I would like to emphasize to our listeners and viewers, LuvBay. If you're dealing with an issue of child support, first of all, it is totally your choice on whether or not you want to file. If filing for child support is going to cause more harm to you and your child than good. So we're not telling anyone to go do anything just to do it, because you still have to weigh your options. You know your case, you know your situation, you know what you're dealing with. But if you feel that it's the best thing for you to do, you can. We want you to be informed on that. It's not easy. It's emotionally draining. It may even be challenging just to get there. It definitely is challenging dealing with the process mentally and emotionally. But if you decide to go forth, you have every right to do so. And so we do want to talk about the process, I want to go to TYB first because TYB has some very, very strong feelings on the issue of child support. But I think it's a great thing. I really do, because there are not enough voices to speak up on the issue in a positive manner. When I went through my own case, I had men of the church, clergy, again, religious institutions, also in the area of child support, do damage to women who are trying to get help. I was advised by the church to not file for child support. Now, mind you, my situation when I left, I have 5 children, but 4 of them were under 18 with me when I left. So I was supposed to assume full responsibility for the 4 children that I created with this person. And it was just supposed to be okay. I was told by the church, well, child support is unfair. So I was supposed to be solely financially responsible for 4 children that I created with someone else. And it's just, there are not enough male voices to speak up and say, this is not right. And Jennifer, as you said, when you walk into a court, this is not the mother saying, this is what I want, give it to me. No, there are calculations, that there is this huge calculator that sits on the desk. Numbers are put in from both sides. The mother doesn't say, this is what I want, and it happens. No, it's the court doing their job. But I would love for you to talk about the process. But before we do, TYB, if you could share your thoughts on child support.
Yeah, thank you, Tia. The subject about child support is very touchy, coming from a man. Everything that I'm saying is from my own personal point of view. Child support is good. What I would say is men and women should be able to take care of business. If we sort of, as a man, if we do our business, if I say it in that, and we sort of, we neglect the children or the child, the question that we have to ask ourselves will be, who do you want to sort of take care of your business? And even if the woman gets married, that doesn't mean that you absolve yourself from responsibility. You got to take care of what you have to take care of. Because if, say, the man or the woman gets into a different marriage or a new marriage, there is a possibility that they also have children from elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So now you are compounding a whole lot of things. So things will have to be made clear to both parts. I mean, with the understanding. And that post-COVID, we've seen the upswing of domestic abuse. And domestic abuse also may lead to divorces. And so what I can see as a person who at some point in time, I was paying child support to 2 different parents. And I had to do it. It got to a point where I used to sleep outside, because what I believe is that it would be better for me to sleep outside in the cold for the children, to sleep inside. That is my thinking, because I believe strongly that to give the children the foundation to be able to succeed in life, you have to be involved. Mm-hmm. And being involved doesn't mean that, okay, you stay somewhere and then you just use your megaphone and then you just say, yeah, do this, do that. No, you got to be involved physically, of course. There's been so many instances where there's been violence after the fact because there was no understanding between the parties. But then there are laws out there. I mean, Jennifer was speaking about what pertains in the US. It's the same thing here. Basically, we look at the same thing. Basically, the laws are the same. In Canada, for instance, the collection of child support, it rests on the state. I'm in Ontario. So we have the Family Responsibility Office that collects child support for deserving parents. And in our case, the tables have been set already. The table is there, so you don't need to go and calculate. It is there. So if you make in between this and this is how much you pay. You just cannot go and then do anything other than that. There are instances also where the two parents will agree outside of the legal structures. So, okay, let's pay, I'll pay this, or you know, they'll come to an agreement. But sometimes, if it's not backed by law, the paying parent may decide to pay or not to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always great to have a legal backing to child support, even though it's tough sometimes. As I'm speaking with you right now, I have a friend of mine who's lost his father. The mother has Alzheimer's, and this guy has got to go out of the country to go and see to the burial of the father. He cannot go. Why? Because he didn't pay his child support at some point in time. So his license, his passport has been seized. It's one of the stipulations under the act in Canada. Your passport, if you're a driver, your passport and your driver's license in some cases. And then if you don't pay, if the court decides that you have to pay this amount of money and you don't pay, it accumulates. And this is what brings a lot of people into violence, right? So I know for a fact that this gentleman wants to go home, but he can't. Why? Because he didn't pay the child support. Even though the child is over 20 right now. He's an adult. But then because he didn't do his business by paying the child support, it has accumulated.
Yeah.
Today he's sitting down crying. He doesn't know what to do. There's nobody out there to bury the father. The mother has dementia. What does he do? So these are some of the lessons that men and women who are paying child support should take into consideration, where the law backs it up.
Yeah.
You don't have to play with it. You don't have to joke with it. In Ghana, when I visited Ghana a couple of years ago, they have the same thing there. And the first time I heard that people have to pay child support, I was in awe, and I was saying, how are you going to collect it? Technologically speaking, how are you going to collect it? We are not so sophisticated to such an extent that you'll be able to garnish the pay of that person. So how are you able to pay? Yes, they pay. They do pay. If you are taken to the Family Responsibility Office, they call it, I've forgotten the actual name, you pay it. Whether you are a laborer, whether you are a landscaper, whether you are what, you would pay. So it has become accepted. So if everywhere is going to be accepting the fact that if you do your business, you have to pay child support, that would be great, because we'll be creating a generation of children who have gotten good start in life. Because if the mother is not doing any great job, I would say that can sort of take care of the family, then there's a problem. But the mother may be sick. The amount of money that the mother will be making will not be enough to take care of the children and even herself. But she has to be she has to be strong enough to take care of the children. Just like how the pre-flight instructions that we get on board planes says, you got to take care of yourself before you take care of the children. So it's the same thing in life. So as a man, I think I'm in the right place, personally speaking, my own personal point of view, in that if you do the business, you've got to take care of it.
Absolutely. And I think that the statement that you made of sometimes violence comes after dealing with child support, is because the individual has to deal with the consequences of what they've done or not done, and they take it out on the parent who actually needs the financial support for their child. And I think it bears the question, and you don't want to be insensitive, but just dealing with information, just dealing with facts. Why can you travel out of the country, but you can't financially support your child?
Yeah.
So why do you have finances to do these other things you want to do? Why do you have finances to drive a car and you're upset and you get to the point of violence. Now you can't drive your car, but why can you drive? Why can you put gas in the automobile? Why can you upkeep that automobile? Why do you own an automobile if you can't financially support your children? And these consequences are not coming from the parent who is asking for child support. These are consequences from whatever state you live in, whatever country you're in, whatever legal ramifications you face. The other parent did not create that situation, and it's hard enough if you're dealing with domestic violence. It's hard enough if you made the decision. I know I may get some ramifications if I walk into a court to try to get this help. But then you look at it, it's like, why does my child have to suffer further because the other parent, male or female, will not do financially what they're supposed to do? So when the pastors,
see it all the time, the
yes,
weaponizing of it, right? The weaponizing of support and custody and all of it. And instead of, for years I've said it, it's like, just if you would just do what we're saying and focus on the kids and not use it as a weapon against your ex, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we have, the fighting over everything. This isn't mom or dad trying to take money from the other parent because they want to get one over on you. It's the right of the child to have that money. And even if the parent that has the kids is able to support them fully, that's still their right to have it. And I'll give you a perfect example. I have a acquaintance friend that his parents were divorced when he was young, and his mother never went after dad for child support, and she worked really hard to raise them on her own, worked maybe multiple jobs, I'm not sure, but did a great job, him and his brother. And when they became adults, they were mad at their mom for not getting that child support because rightfully it was money for them. And mom struggled all those years. And they were like, maybe you wouldn't have had to struggle. Maybe you wouldn't have had to work 2 jobs. Maybe you wouldn't have. So it's just interesting to see as an adult, somebody saying, hey, you should have done that for me.
Yeah. And it's, your child still has to eat.
Right.
all of the pastors, and they were all male, by the way. The Good Old Boys Club does exist, and I don't care what religion
Yes,
it is.
it
Right?
does.
The Good Old Boys
In many
Club
places.
So while and it's not just restricted to religion. I mean, you can go in business or whatever. It's there. But when I was told, don't do this to him because it's not fair, because he will suffer, I was still responsible for my children. They still had to eat every day. I still had to clothe them. I still had to pay my rent and pay my utilities. I still had to make sure that they were okay. So they needed to be taken care of, but it was all right for all of that to be put on my shoulders. And because he's your friend, we should
just. You were already raising them. And that's already a big responsibility. You have them all the time.
Right now, I have them 24/7.
That's hard. It's hard not to have a break.
None at all. And so it's like, how can you honestly say that this responsibility now should be put on the shoulders after one parent? And I would say, and I said this to one of these pastors, we are in the situation because this man tore his family apart. Had he not done what he did, had he been the husband, had he been the father he was supposed to be, he wouldn't be going to court for child support. This would be fine, but in my situation, I didn't initially go to court. I had a conversation with him. And what I did was work out numbers. I talked to him. I told him, this is what I need. This is what, you can give me every month. We can decide, is this going to be every 2 weeks, once a month, or whatever. But this is a number that I definitely need, and we can go from there. Initially, he said, okay, I'll get back to you. And then he just disappeared. I didn't hear from him or anything. So when I reached out to him, I asked, what do you want to do? And he literally said to me, you left, so you have to take care of him. So I said, you know what this means? I'm going to have to go to court. And he said, well, do what you have to do. That we had that conversation on a Saturday. Monday morning, I went to court. And on Monday morning, I walked in. And Jennifer, I do want you to talk about the process. My process, I would say, was easier than most. I went in to media. I filed for child support. The person who was assisting me, she was very kind. She was very helpful. I went in, I was frazzled. You know, it was paperwork, but she helped me through everything. She helped me fill out the paperwork, answered all my questions. And then I left. A few weeks later, I got a date to come back to court, and I went. The day that I went to court, I sat in front of the representative. I forget her title, but we both sat in front of her. We had to provide our financial information. She pulled out the calculator. She did her thing. She looked at me. She said, do you want this child support to be garnished? I said, yes. And that was it. The number that she gave me was, I think, more than twice of what I had asked him for. Because I would have never asked him for that number. I just wouldn't have. But even though I was entitled to it, I asked him for what I felt like I just needed, and I was trying to keep peace.
You didn't know what you were entitled to
Yeah,
until you knew,
I
right?
got
Until
to
you
know
went
until
and
you
they
knew.
did it.
It was, you know, because this wasn't two people who, all right, we got to some point and we felt like, all right, this marriage isn't working. We're going to go our separate ways, and we can actually still be friends, and we're going to co-parent. This wasn't that. I was leaving violence. I knew what I was in, and I knew what I was going to face if I had really, really pushed the issue. So I was trying to keep peace. That's why I had that conversation first, but it didn't work. I didn't go to court because I wanted to. I went to court because I had to. But when I had to, I was granted a number more than what I would have asked for. And as a matter of fact, that day, when you file for child support, that number starts adding up the day that you file. So when we went to the court date, he actually owed me money and was supposed to pay me then, but he didn't. He walked out of court. And because they garnished his wages, they added that amount onto it. And so he had to pay arrears with that. Now, my process, it was again, I was frazzled, but I had people who were understanding and who were helpful. And not only was I entitled to child support, I was entitled to alimony. But when they worked out the numbers, he financially couldn't pay it, and I didn't fight it. And I said, okay, I'm fine with that. But Jennifer, if you could talk about just the process itself of how you do it, like what you do, what it looks like.
And what you described is pretty spot on. So you can physically go to the office in media, which is called domestic relations. It's a separate building from the main courthouse. You can go in there, walk up to the desk and say you'd like to file for child support, and they'll take you back to meet with someone, and you'll fill out the paperwork. And it really is numbers. You're talking about numbers. How much money do you make? How much money does he make? How many children you have? The ages they are. It's all that kind of stuff. You also have the option now to do it online. There's like a Pennsylvania version that you can do it online. And if I can be swift and try to pull it up in my browser, I'll give you the website. But you usually can go in and do that as well. If you do it in person, they will then do some due diligence. They'll send information out to him as well and ask him for financial information, and then they will give you a date. And now, since COVID, we don't do the in-person conferences anymore. Like you had a conference in person in front of a conference officer. So now what they do is they do a phone conference. So they talk to you on the phone. And I'm not even certain if they do the phone calls simultaneously, where you're both on the call at the same time or not, because there's a lot of contentiousness, right, in child support, and there's a lot of domestic violence and all of that. So I think since COVID, I think they make two separate phone calls and sort of talk each party through what's happening, and they give you the number that at the conclusion they'll say the number that we're going to write this order up for is X, $1,000 a month, let's say. And if anybody asks questions at that point, they then push it to go to a hearing officer, which would be like a court date. If everybody says fine, that's fine, I agree, then it sort of ends there. But you're correct in that the date that you file is the start date of your child support. So you go in on March 1st and you file, but you don't get in to see that conference officer until April 1st. You've accrued 30 days worth of whatever that number is when you get there, April 1st. And I always describe arrears as a no interest loan. That's the way I like to describe it. So you go in, it's $1,000 a month. April 1st, you get your order. You're already going to have $1,000 on arrears. The arrears add up, but they don't compound with interest. There's no interest on them, which I think there should be, but it's just me.
I agree with that.
Everything else has interest. Why does child support not have interest? If you're not paying it, then you should get penalized on that. So no interest loan, it just starts to pile up. So when it gets to a point where either the court sort of flags it because it's too much, or the party that's not receiving the money decides to file a contempt, then it will go to a contempt hearing. Sometimes the court does it on their own. It just gets to be a big number and they say, you know what, we're going to have this guy come in and try to figure out what's going on. They're a little on the kinder side when it comes to that lately. They're not really throwing people in jail very often. I've seen it happen, but not lately. And that goes to the penalties that we have for not paying for child support. So some of the things that we talked about earlier are very accurate here in Pennsylvania. It would be prison time. And sometimes what they do is they say, you are going to go to jail until you pay 10% of whatever it is that you owe. And then you can get out. It's like bail. That's the way to get out. But the money that you pay goes directly to the person that's owed it. So that's nice because usually it's a big chunk of money. Their tax refunds can get grabbed, for lack of a better term. So they get taken away. And so if you have a huge income tax, credit that's coming, then that gets taken and the party that's not receiving child support can get it. Also, if you are a licensed professional, you can lose your license. And that goes for your driver's license as well. And again, passports too. But I will say I don't see a lot of those type things happening. It has to be like a significant amount of money. So the other thing that we do is when you have that arrears amount, that $1,000 that we talked about as an example, when they write your order, they'll say it's $1,000 a month. Dad's going to owe $1,000 a month plus $20 per month on the arrears to pay down the arrears. So you're actually supposed to be getting $1,200 every month in order for the arrears to start shrinking. If they're not making the full payment, that arrears is going to keep going up. And then they're going to end up in that situation where they're going to have a possibility of contempt and then all those penalties we talked about. Now, if you don't agree on that order and you have a hearing, we have hearing officers in Pennsylvania and in Delaware County. And so you go before the hearing officer, and a lot of child support cases are handled, what we say in the legal profession is pro se. So without attorneys, tons of people go and do these by themselves. And you did it by yourself. And it's meant to be user friendly. It's meant to be that way where you can go do that and not need an attorney to do it for you. When you get to that hearing level, it's recommended that you have an attorney, but it's not necessary. The hearing officer is going to talk to you and figure out what it is that you don't agree with. And again, it is a statutory number. So unless you have some viable reason that this isn't going to work, and one of them would be that your income, there's only so much of your income that you can give in child support. So if it's hitting that threshold, then maybe it gets reduced. Maybe there's a negotiation about reducing the arrears because they don't have the extra money to pay, the $200 extra a month. You can make all kinds of agreements at that level. But in the end, if nobody agrees, then it goes to a judge and then you have a hearing before an actual judge.
Yeah. Well, I know a sore point for some of those who have to pay child support, and if you could touch on it, is the person who is paying child support wants to dictate and determine how that money is spent. And you can't do that. You don't have a right to do that. A child needs food, clothing, they need a place to live, the utilities need to be on. There are co-pays for doctor's appointments, medication, whatever the parent who has the child, whatever they deem necessary for that money to be spent on is for them to make that decision. So
that's right. And
violence
guess what?
comes in. Yeah.
It doesn't even matter if it's technically being spent on the kids. It doesn't matter. That money is to be for their benefit, and the right thing to do is make sure it's for their benefit. And running a household is for your kids' benefit. So food, clothing, shelter, electricity, all that stuff comes into play. But I mean, somebody could go out and buy a car with it. Somebody could get plastic surgery with it. I mean, there's things that, we joke about, and there's songs out there about, stuff that people do with
Yeah.
child support money. But we don't police it. It's not policed. Now, I guess if you're sort of a high profile person and you want to take somebody back to court saying they're not spending the money on the kids and they're spending it on something ridiculous, I guess you could do that. Because I work on the end where people are just trying to make ends meet and they're not going out and getting plastic surgery. They're actually
Yeah.
like paying bills. Like, I get that. I've never seen that happen. So, there's no, as the recipient of the money, you don't have to keep track of how you're spending it either. So it just gets mixed into your regular whatever, income, and it sort of gets lost in the shuffle. You don't have to keep track of it.
Yeah. And I would say on the other side of that, as a recipient, there are some things, bills that I've incurred that had nothing to do with child support. And it was up to me to go back to the court and say, hey, I need more money for this, or I want more money for this. For instance, there have been 2 or 3 occasions I've taken my child to the dentist for a regular cleaning, 6-month cleaning. I'm expecting these little teeth to be cleaned and go right out the door. But the dentist will come to me and say, well, a retainer is needed, a spacer is needed. We need to do this, we need to do that. And so that, like, I've gone into an appointment with insurance covering everything, expecting just to go in and out, but went in and came out with a $500 bill for work that needed to be done. That had nothing to do with child support. That just came
it
about.
does, though, because in the order for child support, we will put everybody's responsibility for medical expenses and for extracurriculars, like your kid wants to play soccer, and that costs money, right? Like, not just to sign them up, but maybe for the equipment or whatever it is that they need. We can actually fill that into the order. And typically the insurance, it's required that kids have insurance. So somebody has to pay it, or you have to get it through the state. But then, as for any unreimbursed medical expenses, so that's copays and that's anything over that's not covered by insurance, that's usually split a certain way. And I would say sometimes it depends on what your order looks like, but you'd get like 60-40, 50-50, 70-30, it depends. And then you have to submit those medical expenses to the other person saying that they are supposed to pay you the percentage that they owe. And then we sort of go back through this hamster wheel cycle. If they're not paying it, then you have to bring them back to court to say that they owe you the medical, unreimbursed medical expenses.
I didn't have that part written into mine, like the extra incidentals and the swimming and the wrestling or basketball, whatever. And it was, in my case, it was too much trouble to go back to ask, or even just to have a conversation about it. It wasn't worth the repercussions that I would have gotten. And unfortunately, in my case, once I left, there was never anything directly done to me. It was done to the children, because he only had access to the children in a time, that he would be able to see them. So nothing was done directly to me. He would verbally, mentally, emotionally harm the children, thinking or trying for it to hurt me, and it wasn't. So when I had incidentals, financial incidentals, like the dentist, or is some new activity that came up, I would just cover it myself, because it wasn't worth the hassle for me to go through that. TYB, I would ask you your thought on how this information could be given to and received by the person who's supposed to pay child support. How we could get the individual to see and understand and take it in. This is not personal. This is not about you. This is about the child that you created. No matter what happened between you and your spouse or partner, or whatever, it's about the child. How do we get individuals to focus on the children that they've created?
See, thanks. You see, the whole thing is about the circumstances that led to the divorce or the separation. If it was bitter, you have to expect bitter outcomes. It is also will be dependent on how much that the paying parent is worth. There's been so many instances where there were agreements between the parents that, okay, you are going to pay this. Okay, no problem. I'll give you a check. As a matter of fact, I'm saying this because a friend of mine was in a situation like that. And he was smart enough to be giving out the check. They agreed that, you know what, give me this at the end of the month. No problem. One child, no problem. So it got to a point where there were some infidelities after the fact. Before and after the fact. And then what came about was that when the young lady took the ex-husband to court, she denied having paid her he having paid her anything. But then he had checks that he had given to her to support the fact that he had been very responsible. As a matter of fact, I advised him to do that. Because if you give her the cash,
it doesn't count.
It doesn't count. So he did that. But to get that information, you see, a lot of men think when it comes to child support payments, it's men against women or women against men. Mm-hmm. They take it so seriously, and it goes out of whack. But to get that information out there, I think we need programs like this. We need churches, we need synagogues, we need temples. Child support is not restricted to any particular person. Universally, you've got to do your part. So to get the information out there will be programs like this. And like I said, churches, synagogues, and a whole lot of other areas. Then, having said that, and the other time I was driving, and I went past a courthouse, and I saw a group of men. A group of men protesting, demonstrating outside of the courthouse. I'm sorry about that. That the whole thing was about the fact that men are not being favored when it comes to child support payments and all these kind of stuff. But then my whole question to myself, thinking around that time was, if you had paid, you wouldn't come out there to support. To protest. So the fact of the matter is that if you are in a situation where you feel that, the relationship is going south, it's not going to, go well, then you have to start making arrangements, because the fact of the matter is that you pay, no matter what it is. But then there's so many things. That's why I'm saying that it's very touchy. Back in the early or mid 90s, there were a lot of men from a particular country, I know. And when this divorce thing started unraveling and the government was so keen, the government was so serious to collect it, a whole lot of them relocated. They either left the country or left the city. And then the whole bag or the whole basket was left with the paying parent to hold on to. So it's so tricky that if the paying parent or the receiving parent becomes so dependent on the child support payments, it's dangerous at some point in time. Dangerous in the sense that, what if? There's a question of what if there's an accident, there's death on one of them. What happens there? What really, really happens? So it's a touchy subject. It's got its fine prints and a bad print. But all in all, the information should go out there for men. Men should, nobody should educate anybody to give any information to anybody where child support payment is concerned, because you did the business, you got to take care of it.
Yeah.
So whether you have an information or you don't have any information, it means that you have not been responsible. it has nothing to do with the children or the child. It's between the two adults. So there has to be some sort of an understanding and not adversarial. So that, you know what, if say the pain, no, if the mother or the father who is receiving the payment doesn't have the right sort of environment to operate to take care of the children, it becomes a problem. Mental health, and a lot of it has an adverse effect on the children. So it's very touchy, and it's good that we have to take non-paying parents to court. But then it's got some other areas that where we have to also look at it. But so far as I'm concerned, you do the business, you got to take care of it.
And I
made
agree.
a great point about credit for payment, which is if you're paying for your child, even if it's less than what you get ordered for in court, you're going to get credit for what you already paid. As long as you have proof. So don't pay cash.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So write a check.
Yes, right.
Money order, check, yeah.
Mhm.
Venmo, whatever that you can track.
Yes. When I filed for child support, I filed because I needed it. And I knew when I filed, I did not want to always be in that position. I had a job. I had a very good job, but leaving, completely starting my life over, starting with my children, I needed the financial support. And so I knew it in myself. And I had this conversation with God. I said, I don't want to always be in this position where I need this child support. So when I began initially receiving it, I needed it. But I was able to get to a point where I don't need it. I have it now because that's the responsibility of the other parent. I have it because it's what is supposed to be done. And having said that, had he not paid child support, I really would have been in a worse financial situation. And at the same time, I was not able to receive any benefits from the state. So like I didn't qualify for welfare. I applied for food stamps. Like I was told, no, you make too much money. And I'm standing in front of you, like I'm telling you, I have these 4 children. I need help. I need help to put food on my table. And you're telling me that I have enough money. If I had enough, I wouldn't be standing here. So I had to make it work. If I never got those child support payments, I still had to make it work because I didn't qualify for help from the state, even though I had a job. But I was able to get to the point in managing my finances where I no longer need it. What I needed years ago. Now it's no, this is because what's supposed to happen. So everybody's situation is different. And so because I had that thought, if these payments stop, then what? What am I going to do? So I had to have a backup plan. I had to be able to care for myself. I had to be able to care for my children. And that's not easy. So again, LuvBay, as we always say, any conversation that we have, any information that we put forth, any suggestions that we throw out there, we are not saying that the situation is easy. It's not. But TYB made a good point. What if that child support stops? What if that the parent paying, what if it disappears? You cannot rely, I believe, 100% on child support. You have to do the best that you can do for yourself and make other ways, financial ways, when you can and if you can. That's something to keep in mind. And we're just under the hour, but Jennifer, I want to ask you. You talked about media being user friendly with the court system going in, and it really is the case for dealing with child support. It is user friendly. I can say that myself because I went through it and I did it. But I want to ask you, does your office provide assistance for individuals who find themselves having to go through the process of needing child support, be it from any crime? Like, do you actually help?
Absolutely. So even though, and I know we talked about this earlier, child support and custody are very connected, but in the court, when we're in a child custody situation, we're not allowed to talk about support and if somebody owes money and if they haven't paid or if you're fighting. And I find that very frustrating because when I have a client come into my office, I will talk to them and figure out holistically what they need. It's not just a one thing and done. We'll sit and talk about custody. We'll talk about support. And yes, we help with all of that. I give options and information, and everybody's case is different. And I often will have people say, well, my friend did this, and this was her situation was very similar. And I go,
No.
stop right there because everybody's situation is unique. You, we'll talk about what this looks like for you, and then you have to decide what you want to do. I have people say to me, what would you do? I say, it's not about me, it's about you. And you have to make those hard decisions for yourself. Sometimes going forward on the support side, people will say to me, well, he's not bothering me right now as far as custody goes, and I really would prefer it to stay that way. And I say, okay, I guarantee you that if you file for child support, he's going to all of a sudden be interested in seeing those kids because if he has to pay for them, now all of a sudden he wants to have some interaction with them because he feels like that's owed to him. So I often just give that information and then you decide, like maybe, and I've had clients say to me, I don't need the support and I don't need the aggravation. So I'm not going to go down that road. That's fine. That's fine. We just give the information and you have to decide the path that you're going to take moving forward. And it doesn't shut the door forever either. You could say to me today that you don't want child support because you're doing okay and everything's fine. But then maybe in 3 months or 6 months or a year down the road, you're like, you know what? This is really hard. And my kids deserve better. And so I think I'm strong enough to go ahead and do this now. That's fine. You can do it then. You just can't wait until they're 18 because you can't go back. And it only you can't go retroactively. So it goes from that date that you file. So you can't say, well, my kid's 5 and I should have filed 5 years ago. No, it only goes forward. So you just have to keep that in mind too. Whatever you've lost, you've lost. You can't get that back.
Right. So in my personal case, when I filed, my 3 older children, they were teenagers, but my youngest child was a little bit over a year. In my particular case, I filed for child support first, which that was never my plan. That was never my intention because we had a conversation, but he reneged on it. So I filed for child support first. And then when my youngest was about, I think she was about 2 or 3, I filed for custody after that. And I did it because I knew as a small child, he was not going to fight me on custody. He wasn't, because he wasn't going to want to look after her and take care of her. It just wasn't going to happen. When he did have visitation, he made the older kids, look after her while that was happening. So I knew that I was not going to have an issue with custody. So I did the support first. I filed for custody. I got everything that, I needed and wanted. It worked out. But could you talk a little bit more about the statement you made, because you alluded to it? When you're talking about child support, custody does not matter. The court does not want to hear about that. When I was in court for custody, the child support didn't matter. They didn't want to hear about that. They were 2 separate entities. It's emotionally draining, mentally, physically draining. It really is. But a lot of women, and I'm just, because it's a majority number, it happens to men too, but a lot of women, when they're filing for child support, they're saying like, he doesn't see the child, he doesn't want to see the child, or they're filing for the custody and they're saying, well, he won't pay for the child. And like, but one has nothing to do legally, one has nothing to do with the other. So before we go on tonight, could you just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. So just like your situation where you were describing that you filed for custody secondary to the support because you knew he wasn't going to fight you on it and you just wanted it solidified, right? You wanted a document that said that you had full custody. That's great. That is one of the first questions, or statements that I make with clients is, the other person better than I do. You lived with them, you had children with them, So you have to decide what path you're going to go down. Now, you don't need a document to say that you have custody of your kids. You had custody of your kids. You were raising them. You were doing everything. You were making all the decisions. You didn't need a court order to do that. But I know that there is some kind of, feeling of relief when you have it, to just know that you don't have to worry about it. And you put yourself in a great position because your daughter was already 2 or 3 and he hadn't really been around. So there was nothing to like argue or fight about because he wasn't showing his face. He wasn't even trying to see her. Right. So it's a perfect example of you did it in the right order, but that's not necessarily the right order for everybody. And you're right. You're in custody court and you may want to say, he owes me $10,000 in arrears. And they immediately say, I can't hear that. That's not legally, they're not allowed to talk about what's owed in child support. And when you're in child support and you're saying, but he doesn't even come see the kids and he doesn't do that, they don't want to hear that either. They're 2 completely separate trajectories that you have to go down, 2 different paths with 2 different sets of like hearing officers, 2 different buildings. It's like, as much as it can be user friendly in one circumstance, it can be very difficult in another. It's not, you can't just wrap it all up and do it all at the same time.
Gia, I have a question for Jennifer. So in the event that the paying parent, say if I'm a truck driver and my license is seized, then what?
Then you can't drive your truck and you can't make money, right?
That's right. And then
Right.
my question to that would be, because your license isn't just taken from you, there has to be some inaction on your part before it gets to that point. So my question would be, while you were driving that truck, why weren't you paying child support?
Right. Well, here's the thing. The court has since determined that throwing somebody in jail sometimes is counterintuitive to trying to get money out of them. Because if you put them in jail, and the same thing with take somebody's truck driving license away, and that's how they earn their living. I think we have to figure out a different way to try to get the money than doing these like really harsh things that is going to only hurt everybody. Because if someone's not earning the money, they can't pay the money. And that becomes a problem too.
So it means if I'm a truck driver and I can drive and then my license is taken, it means I have to find a new profession to go and pay.
Yes, if you get to that point. But I still have the first question. What were you doing to get your license taken?
Well, and
Here's what
the court does. So the court will say, and we have this happen often where someone will say, well, that's my profession and I can't find a job in that profession or whatever it is. And so they will impute, is the word that they use, an income on you. So they'll say, you're a truck driver, you could make X dollars an hour or, a month. And since you're willfully not working or trying to find another job to like at least bring some income in, we're going to impute this income on you. So you're still going to owe $1,000 a month. It's just going to build your arrears up until then you're going to be brought back in for contempt and then have some horrible thing that might happen because you haven't paid.
Yeah. Well, I think the garnishing of wages and the income tax return being sent to the recipient, I think those are 2 of the best things to do. And again, LuvBay, this is about children. If you're dealing with an issue of domestic violence, if your partner or spouse or ex has committed a crime against you, whatever that crime is, you have a right to child support for your child. It's about the child. And, so for instance, if you go to court for child support or custody, you can't go in talking about domestic violence. They did not want to hear that. Everything is separate. So you can't walk into one entity to talk about an issue that could be or should be handled in the court of another entity. It can be frustrating, very confusing. It really can be on all levels, but you have a right. You have a right to make the decisions that are best for yourself. And that might be, I'm not filing for child support. I'm not filing for custody. It may be,
I would say make sure that you get the information so you know what it is that you're giving up before you give it up. Because I've had people say, I'm not going to file. And then I run the little numbers and I say it's $3,000 a month or whatever. And they go, oh, and they had no idea. So at least get the information so you know what it
Yes.
is before you say, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. And you can always get information and you don't have to involve the other party. Like, you can go and find out about child support and custody or protection from abuse orders. You can go get whatever information you need. It does not have to involve the person that caused you harm. It does not have to involve the parent of your child. Information is at your fingertips. So, and information is key and power to whatever it is you need to do or want to do in your life. So as Jennifer said, get the information. And if your decision still is, I don't want to do this, it's best not to do it. You still have all the information, in front of you to do what it is that you want to do or don't want to do.
Change your mind later. So,
Yeah.
It's not a permanent decision.
Yeah. And for me, in all these years that I've been receiving child support, I never went back to change the number. I know that I could have. Every so often I get a notice in the mail that says, I have a right to review this case. I think it's every 3 years. And if there was a significant change, before the 3 years up, I could go back. But for me, it's not worth going through it. Again, for me right now, child support is about the principle of the matter. That's it. It stands. I'm good with that. But I know I could go back and have the case reviewed. But I am making a decision, that's not what I want to do. That's not what I need to do. I'm fine. Because I know for me, in my case, if I do that, it's going to stir up other issues, and I don't want to deal with it. So, and I know we're over the hour. So with that, TYB, I would ask you for your final words on what you would say to that part of LuvBay that should be paying child support. I would ask you to speak to that group on tonight, and then Jennifer, if you would follow with your last words for the evening, and we'll say goodnight after that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be a guest on the program. Very interesting topic indeed, and thanks to Jennifer. Jennifer has opened my ears and mind to certain things. And what I will say in conclusion to the presentation will be that, just like what I said before, that you do your business, you got to take care of it. Because you see, you want a child or children whom you can say somewhere down the line in the future, that, oh, that is my child. Nobody should know that you paid child support. If you paid child support, so what? That's your children. That's your child. Those are your children. So for starters, I think sanity should prevail. There's got to be that understanding. If the understanding is not there for the taking care of the children, hey, I still come back to the point that you do the business, you got to take care of it.
Thank you. Jennifer, your final words for LuvBay on tonight?
Thank you. So I will say that I think if we all focus on the children, right, and worry about them and that they're our future and we want them to be successful, everybody should be doing their part. And if you don't have the children in your home a significant period of time, you're getting a free ride. Kids are expensive. So,
Yes.
and I would say to anybody that's even considering getting child support, get the information before you make your decision, and make the decision that's best for you, and know that you can change it down the road if your circumstances change.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate you being here on tonight. And I absolutely would love to have you back in the future. But I really appreciate the information that you shared. And as TYB said in the beginning, we want to educate. We want to start conversations. We want to open the eyes and ears of all of our listeners and viewers. And it's just very, very interesting. TYB, I've come back to this point several times since we talked about it. Yeah. So many issues come from the topic of domestic violence. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes back into it. And unfortunately, child support is one of them, because individuals use their children as weapons. So Jennifer, I thank you again so much for being here. TYB, I thank you for being with us on tonight. I would love for you to come back and guest again as well. We have to think about what we want to talk about next time.
Okay.
LuvBay. If you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence TV. Thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia here on LuvBay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. LuvBay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Good evening.